Ever find yourself, just going about your workday, maybe head down in a spreadsheet, when suddenly, bam, the mood just totally shifts. Like you look up and someone's completely lost it, turning some minor thing into like this huge meltdown.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy how fast a normal day can go totally
Yeah,
sideways.
you can practically feel the tension in the air.
Totally. And that's exactly the kind of scene that Suram sets up in this excerpt from Office Epidemics. He describes this, wow, it's a pretty intense situation where Raj, the operations manager, completely blows up over, get this, a formatting error in a project report.
And, what's so interesting there is that it's obviously not really about the report itself, right? It's like Suram is saying with this whole Pissilepsy thing, there's usually something much deeper going on underneath.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. Pissilepsy, it's definitely a catchy term. What exactly is Suram getting at here?
Right. So he's basically using it to describe what happens when, those everyday work pressures, deadlines, difficult colleagues, all that. What happens when that stuff just kind of boils over and leads to these, well, explosions?
Makes sense.
He points to things like, constant stress, this need to be absolutely perfect, and a lack of like emotional awareness as some of the main culprits.
So in Raj's case, then, it sounds like, based on what we're reading here, that the pressure he puts on himself might be a big reason why he blows up over what seems like a pretty small thing, like a formatting error.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've all been there, right? Feeling the pressure of deadlines, dealing with, demanding colleagues. It's easy to let things get under your skin. But, without healthy ways to cope, those emotions, they can come out in, well, not so healthy ways, just like we're seeing with Raj.
Yeah. It's like that Ambrose Bierce quote, "Speak when you are angry and you will make the best speech you will ever regret." Which, I mean, let's face it, that's often what happens in these situations, right? Someone lashes out, says something they don't mean, and then later when everything's cooled down, they're left dealing with the consequences.
Right. And those consequences, as we'll get into, they can be pretty big, impacting not just the person who blew up, but also like the whole team dynamic.
And one of the things Suram does is he lays out these like really clear signs of, what he calls Pissilepsy, these red flags that someone might be prone to these kinds of outbursts. So it's like obviously the frequent outbursts themselves, but then also this tendency to like blow things out of proportion, little things that on a good day you might just brush off, they suddenly become a huge deal.
Yeah, and what often gets missed is how that impacts everyone else. It's not just about, that one person's outburst. It's like this ripple effect, it goes out and touches everyone around them.
Totally. It's like being in a meeting and like you can practically see people exchanging these nervous looks, wondering who's going to be the one to like set off the next explosion.
Exactly. And that's when you start to see those other symptoms that that Suram talks about. People start to like withdraw. They're afraid to speak their minds.
Right.
Everyone's walking on eggshells, just, trying not to trigger another like blow up.
And we see this play out with the other characters that Suram brings in, right? So like there's Manoj, the junior analyst, who was kind of on the receiving end of Raj's outburst about the report. He's like completely terrified of making even the smallest mistake now.
Right. And then there's like Sneha, who's basically decided the best way to, avoid an explosion is to just avoid Raj altogether.
Yeah, steer clear. And then, of course, there's Karen, who, if you remember, he was like so enthusiastic at the beginning, full of ideas. He's totally shut down now, right?
Yeah.
Like afraid to make any move at all because, what if it's met with like anger or criticism?
Totally. It's like that fear becomes, I don't know, almost contagious or something.
Yeah.
Creates this environment where everyone feels like they're constantly under a microscope, never really sure when the next, outburst is going to happen.
Right. And then you can imagine what that does to like productivity and creativity.
It's awful.
Right.
When people are like constantly on edge like that, just waiting for the other shoe to drop, I mean, forget about innovation. Morale goes down.
Yeah.
It just becomes this toxic work environment. People
Yeah.
they clam up. They can't do their best work when they don't feel safe.
So we've talked about, the symptoms, the impact, all that, but what can you actually do if you're dealing with this, like, office explosiveness? I mean, you described it, it sounds like it can really, like, throw a wrench in a team's whole vibe,
Oh, absolutely. It can really derail things. But, the good news is Suram actually gives us some really practical advice on dealing with these situations. He even has this, like, self-assessment tool in there,
Yeah.
a way for people to kind of gauge how serious things are, for them.
Okay, so, I mean, self-assessments, they can be a little, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not like we're trying to, like, diagnose anyone or anything.
Right. No. It's not about that. Think of it more like a map.
Yeah.
It just helps you figure out where you're at,
Huh.
like on a scale, from just noticing a few little red flags to like, okay, this is a real problem.
Right, right, got it. So how do you know when it crosses that line then? From a bad day, which everyone has, to like, whoa, this is a pattern. Like, what are some of those warning signs to watch out for?
Well, he has these three levels: perception, problem, and pain. So at the perception level, it might just be a one-time thing, like maybe someone's having a bad day or there was a miscommunication. And the key at this stage is really just to be supportive, to communicate clearly, and, try to see things from their perspective.
Right, it's like leading with empathy rather than like jumping to conclusions or even worse, like meeting them with the same energy.
Exactly. But then when it's like, okay, this is becoming a pattern, like it's consistently affecting your work or, the team's morale, that's when it moves into like problem territory.
Hmm.
And this is where he introduces this calm framework, which I think is really helpful.
I do love a good acronym. Okay, so calm, break that down for us.
Okay, so calm stands for communicate carefully, avoid confrontation, loop in management or HR if you need to, and maintain professionalism.
It's really about setting boundaries, but like in a way that's still respectful, you know?
Right, it's like protecting yourself, your own well-being, but also kind of recognizing that there might be something else going on with that person.
Exactly. And, sometimes, even when we try our best, things can still escalate to what he calls the pain level, where it's really like hurting relationships, productivity, all of it. And that's where pause comes in.
Pause. Okay, another good acronym. This one feels like especially useful for those moments when you're like in it. You know what I mean? Like when someone's actually in the middle of an outburst. Yeah, totally. So pause stands for pause. Acknowledge their emotions, understand the triggers, stay calm, stay in control, and encourage a solution-focused discussions, like this roadmap for de-escalating things while still, addressing the issue.
Right. So it's not about being defensive or, firing back. It's like taking a second to gather yourself, try to kind of understand where the other person is coming from, and then like shift that energy towards something more productive.
Exactly. And, what I really appreciate is that he gives us more than just like these frameworks. He gives us some real life examples too. Like he walks us through this scenario where, a manager blows up in a meeting and he shows you step by step how to use pause in that moment to like de-escalate the situation, protect yourself, and maybe even, help that person get back on track.
Oh, wow. That's really helpful. So it's not just theory, it's like things you can actually use.
That's right. And I think that's what's so great about this whole like deep dive that we're doing. It's not just about, pointing a finger at a problem. It's about giving you the tools to like handle tough situations, to make your work life healthier and, more productive.
Totally. And I think even more importantly, it's about understanding that like office explosiveness, it's a human thing, right? It usually comes from somewhere deeper. And if we can approach these things with a little more empathy, try to understand, we might not only be able to like calm things down in the moment, but maybe even open the door to some like real conversations, real solutions. So like if you've ever been in the line of fire of one of these office explosions, remember, calm and pause. And hey, next time you're in like a tense meeting or you get that email that just rubs you the wrong way, take a second. Take a breath. Try to see the other person's perspective and, see if you can steer things in a better direction.
I love that. And, if any of our listeners have their own stories or advice, we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. Head over to our social media. Let us know. Have you dealt with office explosiveness? How'd you handle it? What worked for you? We can all learn from each other. Until next time, everyone, happy navigating, right?